I decided to surprise my cheating wife. Her things were already in the suitcase, carefully packed, as I always did with care during all these years of marriage. But this time, there was something different. On top of everything, a letter. Here are your things. Take it and get out of here. I discovered all the cheating and I'm divorcing you. These words echoed in my mind, mixing with the emptiness that took over me. The anger was there, boiling, but what predominated was the suffocating betrayal, the hole in my chest, the unbearable pain of realizing that all the plans, all the promises meant absolutely nothing to her. I wonder when it all started to fall apart. It wasn't just infidelity, it was the dirty game, the lies so well planned, that they blinded me little by little. She pretended to be perfect. Always helpful, attentive, as if our love was still intact. How naive I was. How I allowed her to get so close that I didn't notice the abyss that opened between us. In the last few months, I noticed something wrong. It was difficult to explain, a distrust that was taking hold, a subtle change in her gaze, in her apologies that became more frequent and increasingly colder. Too many meetings at work, short trips that came out of nowhere. And I, foolish, always trusting. Always believing. Each goodbye kiss seemed full of secrets, but I didn't want to believe it. Until that afternoon, sitting alone in our room, I realized that the silence was more revealing than anything. There was something much bigger going on. So, I decided it was time to find out. I took her cell phone, without her noticing, and found what I feared: messages, photos, promises of a future far away from me. The lover was more than just a passing fling. He was someone with whom she planned a new life. The words I read destroyed me. When will I be able to get away from here? Soon, love, soon. He promised that the two of them would live together, far from me, far from everything we built. They talked about money that I didn't recognize. Of transfers, of a new beginning, of secret accounts. She was embezzling everything, every penny we had saved over the years. It was like she was building her way out while still smiling at me every day. I remember when I first confronted her, I didn't give too many details. I wanted to see how far she would go with her lies. Her gaze didn't tremble, her answers were firm, almost rehearsed. "You're imagining things," he said with irritating calm. "Why would I do something like that to you?" She reversed the situation, made me feel like the villain for being suspicious. And for a moment, I even believed it. I began to withdraw, suffocating my doubts. But the feeling didn't go away. Every night she slept next to me, I became more restless. It was there, within reach of my hands, but at the same time miles away. It was then that I knew. There was no turning back. The betrayal was there, evident, not only in acts of physical infidelity, but in financial betrayal, in plans that involved leaving me with nothing. That night, I decided that she would have absolutely nothing left of me. If she wanted to escape, I would help. I packed her bags with the same care with which I always took care of everything in our lives. Every piece of clothing folded with precision, every shoe carefully stored. But along with these things came my final decision. I took a sheet of paper and wrote the hardest letter of my life. Here are your things. Take it and get out of here. I discovered the whole betrayal and I'm divorcing you. The words came out quickly, dryly. There was nothing left to feel other than disdain, perhaps. Somehow it was liberating. It was the only way out for me. That night, the suitcase was packed, next to the door. I waited for her to arrive. The house was silent, almost sepulchral. When I heard her open the door, my heart sank. She came in smiling, as if nothing was wrong. When he saw the suitcase and the letter, his smile disappeared. She looked at me, confused, trying to understand what was happening. But I didn't say anything. I just stared at her. The silence between us was deafening. I knew she understood. Her expression changed. It wasn't regret that I saw. It was fear. Fear that everything she had planned had gone down the drain. I wanted her to feel the weight of every decision, of every lie. I wanted to see the regret in her eyes for everything she had done. But what came next was something I could never have imagined. She didn't beg, she didn't cry, she didn't try to explain it to me. Instead, he picked up his cell phone with shaking hands, and I knew in that moment that there was much more to this whole story than I had realized. She started typing furiously, and I stared at her, trying to understand what was happening. And then, it all made sense. Her fear was not of losing me, of losing her marriage or her home. The fear was that the lover was not prepared to act. They were ready to disappear together, running not just from me but from the consequences of what they had done. I could barely process it. What was she typing? Who was she warning? It was as if the woman I had known for so many years had never existed. There was a plan at work, something big, something that went beyond the betrayal I had discovered so far. And it was at that moment that I realized, I wasn't in control of the situation like I thought. The question that was going through my mind was just one: what is she still hiding? What had she done while I believed we had a future together? And worse, how far was she willing to go to save her own plan, even if it meant destroying me completely? Welcome to the channel, where no betrayal is supported or tolerated. Here, all the stories are fictional, but the message is clear: betrayal destroys lives, families, and trust. Each narrative reveals the devastating impact of lies and disloyalty. Now, get ready, because the story you are about to hear is intense and full of twists and turns. Happy listening and be ready to be shocked by what's to come. That morning, as the sun invaded the kitchen with a soft glow, Lucas felt the weight of a routine that, while seeming comfortable, brought with it an unsettling feeling. He looked at the table set up, the glasses arranged precisely, and the familiar smell of fresh coffee filling the room. He was there, in that same place that welcomed him so many times, but something inside him seemed different. At first glance, the life he and Amanda had built over nearly 10 years of marriage was solid. The house they lived in seemed a perfect reflection of their achievements, spacious, cozy and, above all, a refuge from the outside world. Amanda was always meticulous, every detail planned, from the living room rug to the discreet decoration on the balcony. She worked as an interior decorator, and this touch of perfectionism was in everything she did. Lucas admired that about her, the way everything in her life seemed to be in the right place, as if nothing could get out of control. She was the person who brought order to the chaos of life, the one who made sure that all aspects of everyday life worked perfectly, almost like a well-oiled machine. But recently, Lucas noticed a subtle change in Amanda. It wasn't that she stopped doing the things she always did. Her clothes were still impeccably folded, the house was untouched by clutter, but there was a growing distance. The looks that used to be exchanged at dinner now seemed to float over a silent table, filled only with the sound of cutlery. Lucas missed the easy laugh, the light conversations about the dreams they shared, the long nights planning the future. Lately, the night seemed cold, not because of the Florida weather, but because of the lack of connection that used to be so natural between them. Lucas, in turn, was a man of routines, someone who found security in the predictable. He ran his own financial consultancy company, a career that satisfied him due to the intellectual challenge it brought. In the early years of their marriage, he and Amanda were inseparable. They did everything together, from short spontaneous trips to deep discussions about the future. For Lucas, Amanda was more than his wife. She was his confidant, his life partner. He admired her for her strength and determination, for how she managed to make everything seem simpler. But now, something was different. He didn't know exactly what it was, just that the silence between them was becoming heavy. When he looked at Amanda, he saw the woman he loved so much, but he also noticed that she seemed to be somewhere else. There was a coldness in their gestures, an absence disguised by polite smiles. Something was slipping through his fingers, and Lucas, even without knowing what it was, began to feel an emptiness growing inside him. They had a comfortable, stable life, something that many couples strive for. However, material success did not seem to be enough to fill the gap that was beginning to open up. It was as if everything they had built, the perfect house, the promising careers, the mutual friends, had lost its luster. Lucas spent hours in his home office, reviewing reports, talking to clients, but deep down, his mind wandered. He didn't know exactly where things had changed, just that the marriage wasn't the same anymore. In the few deeper conversations they tried to have, Amanda always changed the subject, avoiding any topic that could cause discomfort. She preferred to talk about the new decoration project she was developing, about the latest trends in interior design, and Lucas, although he tried to be interested, felt that these conversations were just a way of avoiding the real problem. Little by little, he began to wonder if there was something more, something that was beyond her understanding, something she wasn't willing to share. Amanda, in turn, felt trapped in a web of conflicting feelings. On the one hand, there was the comfort and stability of her marriage to Lucas, a good, loving man who always supported her in her decisions. But on the other, there was a growing restlessness, a feeling that something inside her was crying out for change. As much as she tried to ignore it, this feeling was eating her up inside. She found herself thinking about how things had changed. The initial brilliance, the overwhelming passion, had given way to routine, to predictability. And although she never openly complained about it, Amanda knew there was something missing. In the last few months, she had immersed herself in work, dedicating herself diligently to each new client, each new project, as if trying to fill the emptiness she felt. Work was her escape, a refuge where she could control everything, where things made sense. Unlike marriage, where emotions and feelings were complicated, at work everything was linear. All you had to do was choose the right colors and the appropriate furniture, and the environment would be transformed. There were no surprises. There were no uncertainties. Amanda looked at Lucas and knew he also felt the distance, but she didn't know how to face him. He was predictable in his behavior, trustworthy to a fault. And, in a way, that bothered her. It wasn't that she wanted a chaotic or unpredictable wedding, but the monotony was starting to take a toll. They had everything, but at the same time, they had nothing. Amanda felt as if she was living two lives, one where she was the perfect, devoted wife, and another, an internal one, where she struggled with her own feelings of dissatisfaction. She remembered the long conversations they had when they first met, the enthusiasm of making plans, how Lucas made her laugh with his grandiose ideas about the future. But now, those conversations seemed distant. It wasn't that she didn't love him anymore, at least, that's what she told herself, but the love felt different, almost like a comfortable friendship without the spark it used to have. The setting of the house, always tidy and silent, reflected their lives, organized, but lifeless. And as the days went by, both Lucas and Amanda found themselves stuck in a routine of appearances, where everything seemed to be in order, but, inside, something was in ruins. The silent nights, the dinners without conversation, the quick kisses when leaving for work, all of this had become part of a rehearsed choreography, where they both pretended that everything was fine. But Lucas was no fool. He might not know exactly what was wrong, but he felt something slipping through his fingers. There was a tension in the air that he couldn't dispel, a feeling that something was about to happen. He knew he couldn't keep ignoring it for long. Soon, something would have to change. As Amanda looked in the mirror that morning, adjusting her dress with precision, she wondered how much longer she could maintain this facade. The smile she gave Lucas when he entered the kitchen was cordial, almost automatic, but inside, she knew something was different. And with each passing day, the distance between them seemed to grow more. Lucas picked up his coffee mug, sat down at the table, and for a brief moment, he thought about how everything looked so perfect on the outside. But as he looked into Amanda's eyes, he knew that this perfection was only skin deep. There was something there, hidden, that he still couldn't see. And deep down, he feared finding out what it was. The days began to pass with suffocating slowness for Lucas. The feeling that something was wrong had grown from an annoyance to a silent certainty. Amanda followed her routine, with the same perfectionism as always, but there was something in her gestures that now left him on alert. Lucas observed her more closely, noticing the small details that he previously ignored. The schedules that didn't coincide, the messages exchanged more frequently on the cell phone, the excuses about work commitments that, suddenly, seemed to appear from all sides. He tried not to let paranoia get the best of him, but something inside him screamed that their marriage was no longer the same. On one of those nights, Lucas was in his home office, reviewing some work documents, when he heard Amanda on the phone in the next room. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but there was a strange intimacy to the conversation that made him stop and pay attention. She laughed softly, a laugh he no longer heard within those four walls. His heart sank. He wanted to believe it was just another work conversation, but the lightness and affectionate tone with which she spoke indicated something else. That feeling of emptiness, which he tried so hard to shake off, intensified. That night, for the first time, he couldn't sleep next to her. Amanda's body seemed distant, and the silence between them became increasingly unbearable. Lucas turned his back, facing the dark ceiling, the thought pounding in his mind, there's something she's hiding. The weight of doubt consumed him. What was once just a suspicion now seemed more real than he wanted to admit. In the following days, Lucas began to look for answers, but always carefully. I didn't want to confront her without proof. So he decided to observe. Amanda's departures were becoming more frequent, always with excuses involving new clients, last-minute meetings, or professional events. She had an undeniable talent for keeping up appearances, and, to those who didn't know her as well as Lucas, everything seemed completely normal. But he knew her every gesture, every change in her mood. Something was wrong, and he couldn't ignore it any longer. One morning, while Amanda was in the shower, her cell phone vibrated on the kitchen table. Lucas hesitated for a moment. The impulse to respect her privacy was still there, but the need to know the truth was greater. He picked up his phone, only to see a message that said, "I can't wait for us to be together again. I miss you." His heart raced, and his hands shook. The sender had no name, just a number he didn't recognize. Lucas left the cell phone back in its place, as if nothing had happened, but the impact of that message echoed inside him. From that moment on, he knew something much deeper was happening. The small suspicions had turned into a cruel reality. He wanted to confront her, wanted to scream, but he held back. I couldn't act on impulse. I needed more. I needed to understand how far that betrayal went. Over the next week, he followed her to one of the work meetings Amanda mentioned. It was late afternoon, and she left the house without suspecting that he was watching her. Lucas saw her enter a discreet restaurant, the kind of place where secret encounters could easily go unnoticed. He waited for a few minutes before deciding to enter. His heart was beating fast, his throat was dry. The thought of catching her made him shudder, but he needed to see it with his own eyes. I needed to be sure. Upon entering the restaurant, Lucas saw her sitting at a table, laughing casually with another man. The smile on her face was so genuine, so different from the one he saw when they were together. The man, a complete stranger to him, seemed completely at ease, gently touching Amanda's hand on the table, while she spoke with a sparkle in her eyes that Lucas hadn't seen in a while. It was like a punch in the stomach. There, at that moment, he was sure of what he had been suspecting. Betrayal was no longer a possibility. It was a brutal truth that hit him hard. He watched them for what seemed like an eternity, unable to move, as if his body was trapped by the shock. Amanda was betraying not only her trust, but the entire story they had built together. He left the restaurant without being seen, his heart heavy, his thoughts confused. I felt anger, despair and, at the same time, overwhelming sadness. When he arrived home, the silence in the house seemed to amplify his pain. He sat on the couch, staring into space. Now he knew the truth. Amanda had a lover, and she hid him perfectly. The man he saw was a reflection of the distance she had placed between them. The woman he married, who once promised to be by his side at all times, had become a stranger. Lucas couldn't stop thinking about Amanda's coldness, how much she had lied without hesitation. Everything he thought he knew about their marriage now seemed like an illusion. What else was she hiding? How many other secrets were there that he didn't already know? When Amanda returned home that night, he pretended to be asleep. I didn't have the strength to confront her yet. I needed time. I needed to process everything I had discovered. And, more than that, he needed to prepare for the next revelation. He knew the betrayal was just the tip of the iceberg. There was something more, something much bigger, something she hadn't told him. Lucas lay down, breathing heavily, listening to Amanda walk around the house as if nothing had happened. She lay down next to him, so close and yet so far away. The silence between them was now more than ever an insurmountable barrier. What Lucas still didn't know was that betrayal was just beginning to unveil a much more elaborate plan, something he could never imagine. And while he tried to understand how he got there, the secret Amanda was hiding was about to turn his life upside down. Lucas woke up that morning with a strange feeling in his chest. It wasn't just the pain of betrayal that he had discovered, but a presentiment, a restlessness that seemed to whisper that the worst was yet to come. Amanda had left home early, as usual in recent months, and he remained there, lying in the empty room, thinking about everything he had discovered so far. I knew I needed to act, but before I confronted her, I needed to understand the full extent of what was happening. He felt there was something much bigger at stake. Determined, he got up and began searching the corners of the house in search of answers. I was no longer afraid of being invasive. By that time, the trust that had once sustained their relationship was in shambles. He wanted answers, and he knew he wouldn't get them by patiently waiting for a confession that would never come. After hours going through drawers, documents and seemingly trivial papers, Lucas found something that made him stop. It was a folder, hidden among old magazines in Amanda's office. When he opened it, his eyes went over bank transfer documents, investment accounts that he didn't recognize, all in Amanda's name. These were high values, far above what her work would justify. Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. Where did all that money come from? There was more. Among the papers, he found airline tickets reserved for 2 international destinations, scheduled for a few weeks from now. That was the real shock. The tickets were in her name and that of another man, the same man he had seen at the restaurant. The same man who, in cell phone messages, promised a new beginning. They were planning to run away together. Anger mixed with despair. Lucas felt the ground collapse beneath his feet. All that time, Amanda was not only betraying him physically, but also betraying the future they had built together. She was preparing to disappear with her lover, taking with her all the money he thought was being saved for their future. The sound of the front door opening brought him out of his thoughts. Amanda was back. Lucas, with the folder still in his hands, looked at her when she entered the office. "What is that?" he asked, his voice filled with an eerie calm. Amanda froze when she saw the documents in her hands. There was no more denying it. The truth was exposed, naked and raw, between them. "Lucas, it's not what you think," she tried to begin, but her voice betrayed the fear she was feeling. For the first time in a long time, she looked vulnerable. "Isn't that what I'm thinking?" Lucas took a step forward, his breathing quickened, his eyes fixed on hers. "So tell me, Amanda, what is this? Explain it to me, because I really want to understand how my wife accumulated hundreds of thousands of dollars in a secret account and is planning to run away with another man." She remained silent, unable to formulate an immediate response. Lucas shook his head, throwing the papers on the table. "I saw you too," he said, his voice lower now, almost a whisper. "At the restaurant. I saw how you looked at him. How you smiled. I already knew about the betrayal, Amanda. But this?" He pointed to the documents. "This is beyond anything I imagined. What happened to you? Who is this person you have become?" Amanda lowered her head, taking a deep breath. She knew there was no more running away. The moment he had feared so much had finally arrived. "Lucas," she began, her voice trembling. I never wanted it to come to this. Things between us. They changed a long time ago, and I lost myself." She sat down, as if her legs had given up on supporting the weight of the situation. "At first, it was just small decisions. But then, I couldn't go back." Lucas watched her, trying to process everything he was hearing. The woman he loved, who he trusted with every part of his life, was now standing in front of him, admitting that she was about to leave him. But there was something more. There was something she wasn't telling him yet. "Small decisions?" he asked, incredulity in his voice. "Small decisions? Amanda, you embezzled money. You hid this from me. And now you're planning to run away with this man. How does it start with small decisions?" She looked up, tears beginning to form, but there was something else there, something she didn't want to admit. Lucas noticed. And it was at that moment that he knew the darkest secret was yet to come. "I need to understand," he continued, his voice lower now, more controlled. "I need to know. How long have you been planning this? And what do you intend to do with all this?" He pointed to the scattered documents. Amanda took a deep breath, her hands shaking as she tried to formulate a coherent response. She didn't want to say. "I didn't want to open that wound, but I knew I had no choice. I started transferring the money 2 years ago," she finally confessed. "At first, it was just protection. Something I felt I needed to do. We were growing apart, and I thought that if everything fell apart, I would at least have something for myself." "So you were already preparing for this?" Lucas asked, his voice full of bitterness. "It was already preparing to destroy everything we built, even before anything happened." "It wasn't like that." Amanda exploded, her voice finally revealing the tension she felt. "I tried, Lucas. I tried to make our marriage work. But you've changed. We change. And I didn't want to be stuck in something that wasn't working anymore." "And the money?" Lucas interrupted, without patience for any more excuses. "All that money you took from our lives. Is this part of your plan? What were you going to do with that?" Amanda looked at him, and for the first time, Lucas saw the truth in her eyes. A truth that she didn't want to admit, but that was written there, clear as day. "I was going to leave with him," she whispered, her voice low, almost inaudible. "I was going to leave, Lucas. Far from here. I didn't know how to continue living this life anymore. I needed to escape." Lucas was silent for a moment. The pain of betrayal, which was already consuming him, now seemed to be amplified by the revelation of Amanda's true plan. She wasn't just having an affair. She was willing to take everything from him, even the future he thought they could still have. "And what else?" he asked, his voice cold, almost emotionless. "What else are you hiding from me?" Amanda hesitated, as if weighing her words. Lucas knew there was something more, something she hadn't said yet. The silence between them stretched on, each second more unbearable than the last. "Amanda," Lucas said, approaching her, his eyes fixed on hers. "What haven't you told me yet?" She finally looked up, tears streaming down her face. I transferred all the money to his account," she confessed. "Everything we had. I planned to leave the country. We had been organizing this for months. I wouldn't leave anything for you, Lucas. Nothing." That last revelation hit him like a punch in the gut. Lucas felt his legs weaken, his breathing heavy. His entire life, all his effort, all the future he thought he was building, had been stolen. Amanda didn't just cheat on him with another man. She betrayed him in every aspect of her life. The silence that fell between them after the revelation was deep and overwhelming. Lucas could barely breathe. The pain of betrayal, which had once seemed unbearable, now turned into something even darker, a total emptiness, as if his life had been ripped from within him. The weight of Amanda's words, the coldness with which she admitted that she was ready to leave him with nothing, stuck in his mind like a sharp blade. He stared at her, but the woman before him seemed like a complete stranger. The one who once swore to be by his side forever, who shared dreams and projects with him, now revealed a side he never imagined. And the scariest thing was that she didn't seem sorry, at least not enough. Amanda was not devastated by the pain she had caused, but rather by the exposure of her plan. It was as if she was more concerned about the failure of her escape than the irreparable damage she had done to Lucas's heart. The room felt smaller, suffocating. Lucas paced from side to side, like a caged animal, trying to absorb the magnitude of it all. With each step, he fought the urge to scream, to confront her even more brutally, but something inside him held him back. It was as if all his energy was exhausted. Why? The word came out weak, almost like a sigh. He turned to face her again. Why did you do this to me, Amanda? Was there no other way out? She looked away, unable to face the weight of her guilt. For the first time, Lucas saw something close to regret in her expression, but he knew it wasn't enough. It couldn't be. Her response came in the form of a barely audible whisper. I didn't know who I was anymore, Amanda said, still unable to look him in the eye. I got lost, Lucas. At some point, I felt trapped in a life that no longer belonged to me. Lucas felt the anger rising again. The empty justifications, the explanations she offered seemed to make no sense. She was hiding behind her own insecurities, using them as an excuse to destroy everything around her. He interrupted her. And me? He questioned, his voice full of contained emotion. I was here this whole time. If you felt trapped, why didn't you talk to me? Why didn't you try to find a solution? Instead, you just ran away. You betrayed me in every way possible. Amanda finally looked up, and for a moment, Lucas could see the pain reflected in her eyes. But instead of feeling compassion, all he felt was an unbearable emptiness. I tried, Lucas. I tried to make our marriage work, but I couldn't anymore. And then, she hesitated, searching for the right words. Then he appeared. And, as much as I resisted at first, things got out of control. Suddenly, running away seemed the only way out. Exit from what? Lucas interrupted her. From a marriage that wasn't perfect? Of a life that perhaps wasn't the way you imagined? Amanda, we all go through difficulties, but what you did, he took a deep breath, trying to contain the anger that was growing. There is no excuse for what you did. Amanda remained silent. She knew there was no way to justify her actions, but she also didn't have the strength to continue arguing. The weight of what she had done seemed to finally hit her. Tears began to silently fall down his face, but Lucas was unmoved. You were going to leave me with nothing, he continued, his voice colder now. It wasn't just about betraying our marriage. You were willing to destroy everything I had, our entire future. How could you? Amanda shook her head slowly, not finding an answer. She knew that the full truth was out in the open, and that there was no escaping the consequences. But, at the same time, she felt unable to explain the whirlwind of emotions that led her to make those decisions. The regret that was beginning to invade her was paralyzing. I'm sorry, she said finally. I know nothing I say can fix this, but I'm sorry. Lucas let out a bitter laugh. Her words seemed as empty as the entire marriage they had experienced in recent years. He turned around, crossing his arms, staring at the ground. All he could think about was how alone he was at that moment. Amanda was by his side, but she hadn't been part of his life for a long time. He wondered when, exactly, the disconnect had begun. When did they stop being a couple and become strangers? But now, there was no more room for unanswered questions. Everything was in sight. She had admitted everything, and reality was cruel. What was left for Lucas was to choose what he would do with the broken pieces of the life he had. The options seemed clear, but none of them were easy. There was a decision to be made, a choice that would define the direction of their lives from that moment on. The silence in the room was heavy, almost suffocating. Amanda remained sitting, staring at the floor, while Lucas looked at the window, trying to find some semblance of logic in that storm of emotions. He wanted to scream, he wanted to cry, but what he felt most was an overwhelming sadness, something that went beyond anger or betrayal. It was as if a part of his soul had been ripped away, and he knew he would never get it back. Finally, he turned to Amanda, crossing his arms in front of his chest. His eyes, which before showed so much love, were now cold, empty. "I don't know what I'm going to do now," he said, with frightening calm. "But what you did, it ended everything. There is no turning back." Amanda closed her eyes, feeling the final impact of those words. Their marriage, the life they shared, had come to an end, not by Lucas's choice, but because of his own actions. And now, she would have to deal with the consequences of every decision she made. Lucas took a few steps towards the door, leaving Amanda alone in the office. He needed air. He needed to get away from that suffocating situation to understand what was coming next. But as he walked away, a certainty accompanied him: the life he knew was destroyed, and he would have to find a way to rebuild what was left. There were still many unanswered questions, many unresolved feelings, but at that moment, Lucas knew that the most important thing was to get out of there. He knew the hardest decisions were yet to come. The door closed behind Lucas with a dry sound, leaving Amanda alone in the office, surrounded by the wreckage of her choices. The silence in the house was different now, heavier, almost oppressive. She knew he wouldn't come back. I knew the end had come. Everything he had built over the years, the moments, the promises, the shared life, was over. Tears were streaming down your face, but they weren't enough to ease the weight that was now pressing on your chest. Betrayal had undone everything, and what was left was emptiness. Lucas left home without a clear destination. He drove aimlessly, lost in thought. The road in front of him seemed endless, as did the pain he felt. There was no escaping what had just happened. The weight of the truth still crushed him, but deep down he knew that, despite everything, he had made the right decision in leaving. Along the way, his mind wandered through memories of the relationship, the good times and the signs he ignored for so long. Each scene hit him with renewed force, and the more he thought about it, the more he realized there was no going back. Amanda was no longer the woman he had married, and perhaps she never had been. The cruel plan she had hatched, stealing their money and planning to run away, was the final confirmation that their marriage had been dead for a long time, even before he realized it. But Lucas knew there was still something to be done. He couldn't just leave without tying up loose ends. The money, the financial betrayal, the lies. All of this demanded a response. And he was ready to deal with it. He called the lawyer he had already hired, asking him to meet him urgently. I wouldn't let Amanda get away with it. She could try to run away with another man, but he wouldn't allow her to completely destroy him. There would be consequences. While waiting for the lawyer, Lucas made an important decision: he would sell the house. The house that was once a symbol of the love he and Amanda had shared was now nothing more than a place filled with painful memories, a constant reminder of betrayal. This needed to end. He could no longer live surrounded by memories that imprisoned him. It was time to get rid of the past and start from scratch, even if this fresh start came with deep scars. Amanda stayed in the house for hours, alone, waiting for something, maybe for Lucas to return, maybe for an explanation for the choices she made. But I knew deep down that that wouldn't happen. The penny began to drop, and she understood that there was no escape. The man she planned to run away with, the one she destroyed her marriage for, wasn't worth it. And now, without Lucas, without the money, without the future she imagined, Amanda was alone. The lover, upon learning that Lucas had discovered everything, disappeared without a trace. He also didn't want to face the consequences of the failed plan. What Amanda felt, as she sank into the living room sofa, was not just regret. It was something darker, the realization that she had destroyed not only her marriage, but herself. She had bet everything on a lie, and now she paid the price. His professional life, which he valued so much, was beginning to fall apart as well. Rumors about betrayal began to circulate among friends and colleagues. The image of a competent, confident woman that Amanda had cultivated for years was crumbling along with everything else. She thought about calling Lucas, asking for forgiveness, begging for a chance at redemption. But he knew it was too late. He wouldn't forgive her. And somehow, Amanda also knew that she herself would never forgive herself. The betrayal, the embezzlement, the escape plan, these were wounds that she herself had inflicted on her soul. There was no return. The tears continued to flow silently, but comfort never came. A few weeks later, the divorce was officially finalized. Lucas, determined not to let Amanda take what was left, managed, through his lawyers, to freeze the accounts she had transferred to her lover. The money was safe, and Lucas could at least get the feeling that that part of their lives hadn't been completely stolen. However, the feeling of loss was still overwhelming. He sold the house, as he had planned, and decided to move far away. He would leave everything behind, the memories, the places they shared, the people they knew. I would start again, this time, in search of something more real, more sincere. But before leaving for good, he made one last visit to the house. As he walked through the door, the empty feeling hit him again. Each room brought back a bitter memory, but he knew that would be the last time he would see that place. He left the keys on the kitchen table, the same table where they had sat together so many times to plan the future, and left without looking back. Amanda, on the other hand, watched her life fall apart. Without Lucas, without her lover, without the money and with her reputation tarnished, she realized she had reached rock bottom. She tried, in vain, to recover the work contacts she had lost, tried to rebuild what was left of her professional life, but it was too late. Her world, so well organized and planned, had completely fallen apart. Without Lucas by her side, she had to face the reality that everything she had, the comfort, the stability, was built on the foundation of the marriage she destroyed. And now, with nothing but regret, Amanda realized she had become a prisoner of her own choices. There was no escape from this reality. Lucas moved on, but with scars that would last a long time. He learned, the hard way, that trust is fragile and that a relationship only survives when both parties are willing to fight for it. His life began again in a new place, without the shadows of the past. And although the pain was still there, he knew that the future, somehow, was still within his reach. He wouldn't let Amanda's choices define who he would become. And now, what did you think of this story? Leave your comment below and share your opinion. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next stories. Here, we show how betrayal can destroy lives, and it is important to remember, this channel does not, under any circumstances, support any type of betrayal. Until next time.